70% of people would give people a lethal dose of shocks. Do you remember which experiment that came from? It was Stanley Milgram in Yale University in the 1970s. So why was Yale University studying obedience for people being unethical in a trauma-based society where, you know, arguably the systems are set up for oppression and control of the regular people? I don't know why Stanley Milgram and Yale University would be behind that in the 1970s, but that's what they discovered, that 70% of regular good human beings will give an unalivable dose to people. And then, and this was all what I learned in Psych 101, like literally starting in high school. So why are these the experiments that are in the psych books, right? What truth is in plain sight that they're giving here? And so then, do you guys remember the Stanford Prison Project? And I forget that guy's name. I think it starts with a Z, but he put regular college students together, made some prison guards and some prisoners, and in 1 week, these are regular students at an Ivy League college. The prison guards were being abusive to the prisoners. The prisoners stopped fighting and stopped eating in protest and all these things in protest because they didn't want to be abused. And then a colleague came down and they're like, you can't run this experiment anymore, right? So to me, you know, why are they running that experiment? What information did they get out of it? And how did government officials learn how to control the regular human race by that information of studying both the person in power and the people not in power? Just systemically not in power, right? Kind of like a caste system of sorts. You know, it has to do with an unenlightened person, like a regular person's belief in superiority. It actually goes into Alfred Adler's superiority complex, right? That most people have some kind of a wounding, that they want to feel superior, and so there is a strive to get more education, to do better, to heal that wounding. So if that is a foundational piece of the human experience, which is then based in shame, people try to heal the shame by covering it up, by going and making more money, having a prettier spouse, buying bigger things to prove that they're superior. So that would mean that they have to be superior over other people, which would be, it's actually part of narcissism. A Rutgers professor whose name is also leaving me, she wrote Psychodynamic, I don't know, some really good book about how narcissists think in pecking orders and they like to know where they go. So narcissism is great for the military, right? Where like literally, what rank are you? And that gets to prove who's superior and who's not. Kind of like a Cub Scout badge is how I think of it. So if that's a part of the human condition, the wounded human condition, how do we heal it as a planet? What information can we get from that Stanford prison experiment of how people that are in oppressed positions act? Because we're seeing it right now in family court, right? That's a big place where people are abusing power, whether it's conscious or unconscious, because unenlightened people are in charge that haven't done their work on morality, that let power go to their heads instead of treating it responsibly. And actually what's interesting is that therapists used to be in charge of family court. And as a psychologist, I think therapists should go back to being in charge of family court, because people that haven't worked with families to know how to heal them are actually creating more infliction. Some maybe on purpose, because we don't know if it isn't a sadist in there. So if some are sadists, or we had a confession that this one guy was actually the head of the Satanic Church and a family court judge for the state of Oregon, I believe. It made him sick, all the guilt, because subconsciously he knew and it caught up with him. So he went to a healer friend of mine for a healing, and she started pulling out guilt and shame. So there, even if it's not their conscience, isn't conscience, like it still hits the subconscious, all of the sins that are happening. So what would the planet do to heal this? And there's different theories actually about what to do. So some is to raise awareness, to have more eyes, more light, looking at what's happening in the shadow. So that's why a lot of people are going to social media. There is a theory of raising your vibration. I've looked years ago at how does this happen? And I actually have this meditation on my site. If you bought the Shifting to Financial Abundance track, it is the second one, where you can look in meditation and you'll get spiritual insights about if I'm in this position, what's in this position. When I looked, the truth for my subconscious mind was there are people that are taking advantage of other people's naivete and trust. And so the more awake we are, the less they can take advantage of us. And then there's transparency and real accountability by the people. So that would be, again, the truth. So that would be one way to prove it. But you can look to see why your reality, you're creating it the way that you are. And even if you're like, no, I'm a victim, yes and no. And there's learning experiences on Earth, but we want to take responsibility for everything in our reality, even when we're being victimized, because if you do not, then you do not have the power to change it. And if you don't want the power to change it, that's fine. You might want to scroll on or at least listen to see if you want to upgrade your way of thinking. Sometimes it seems like you don't have the power to change it, but that's all parts that need to be healed until you're like, if we're all made in God's image, that means we're literally all as strong as God, a mirror reflection. So if God can do anything, that means, wait a second, I can too. Okay, so the second thing is you'd need to re-educate people. And so I created a training to help people be educated on void ab initio orders. And that helps educate the police and CPS and these good people, because let's say 70% of them are good. And they're just following orders of their bosses against their own internal compass, which is another healing. Why is 70% of humanity out of touch with their own internal compass? That's scary. We need to heal that, which is why I think healing is the answer. But we also want to raise our vibration, where when we heal these subconscious patterns, it changes the energy frequency that we're in. And I have all kinds of self-help audiobooks on ascensionpsychology.com. And one of the questions I asked from the beginning of life is, why does this exist for me and not for somebody else? And that's where most religions point to ancestral curses, which is also called ancestral karma, generational patterns of trauma, or own childhood traumas, what Freud calls stuck in a repetition compulsion. So I would argue that people maybe not in integrity have studied us, because we know that exists, right? That's why these wars have happened, right? That's why Nazi Germany happened. There were people not in integrity that wanted power and ran experiments on people, which, you know, the Tuskegee experiments here in America, right? Injecting people with, was it hepatitis B? To see how the body responded to it. Not ethical, not in integrity. And there's experiments that we could be doing, like, how do we heal the world? But they're doing what happens if we inject toxic things or put people in toxic experiments. Who needs the results of that? Only people that want to do trauma-based mind control experiments, in my opinion. So anyway, I'm Dr. Lauren Pichard. I'm with Ascension Psychology. As of now, I'm a licensed clinical psychologist, but I'm really an intuitive healer. And I teach people how to also be intuitive and heal. And so everything they get from me, you can use with your own clients too. I have audiobooks on ascensionpsychology.com. I have the training to retrain everybody on void ab initio, fraud on the court, and fraud upon the court orders, so that 70% of the population stops enforcing void orders and stops harming children. Because we all knew in the Milgram experiment that it's harmful. And here's my other question, because when I read this stuff and I heard about certain things, when I was in school, I'd always be like, not me, I refuse to do it. Are you one of those people that refuse to do it? Or did most people just learn it and not think that and make that promise to themselves?